A number of European clubs are exploring a potential deal for forward Jadon Sancho. As it stands, he will stay at United, but this new interest makes Sancho definitely one to watch in the final 10 days of the window. Dan, given the history with Erik ten Hag, with the club, do you think a move, if one comes up, a move to a big European club would make the most sense for him?
I think regardless, once the window closes, I think that can be really the next chapter for Jadon Sancho, whether that's at Manchester United or another club, because while the window's open, it is quite easy to have this narrative around what happened with Ten Hag last season, and of course he was so good at Borussia Dortmund in spells last season as well, whereas when the window closes, at least he can finally move on, whether that's at United with the four other wingers who were there, the likes of Marcus Rashford, Alejandro Garnacho, Anthony Ahmad as well, but he can also play in the false nine position, so there definitely is space for him at United. I think the question is who is out there in Europe who really needs that winger. You know, you look at PSG, they signed someone in this week, so they've potentially cooled their interest in Sancho. You look who else is out there in Europe. There doesn't seem a natural fit at the moment, so I think he's best off trying to get his way back into that United side. And I think there'd be nothing more than the fans at Old Trafford wanting to see Sancho succeed. It's just whether he's given the opportunity and whether he can really work his way into the system, I think.
I just can't see where he fits at the moment. It's good that they've buried the hatchet and that he's not training with the kids and not allowed into the complex, things like that. Nobody wants to see stuff like that happening. But there's a lot of barriers to him getting into that Manchester United team. We saw he wasn't in the squad on Friday. Obviously, that was a little bit to do with illness. But now he's out that squad. So for him to get back in, someone's got to come out, and I don't see who that is. And people are talking about like the false nine position as a fail-safe. Manchester United have got two recognised centre forwards now that will want game time. I don't really see that as a viable option. The right hand side looks like Ahmed's really made a play for that position to make that his own. They've got Anthony, who cost a lot of money there as well. On the other side, you've got Rashford and Garnacho, both their best football side. So I think there would be rules that position out. Number 10, Fernandes and Mount. So I don't, although we're saying Sancho can play in all these positions, I don't see at Manchester United when he's going to play in those positions with all those options.
Why do you think there's been no Premier League clubs associated with him in the last few days? We're just hearing that there might be some interest from European clubs.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the interesting thing is, it's what does Jadon Sancho want? You know, does he want to be playing football, which you would imagine wants to play every week? But then you look at the other clubs in the Premier League. You know, unless you looked at Arsenal, for example, you know they're very settled with the likes of Trossard, Saka, Martinelli. Tottenham have a wealth of wingers as well. Likewise in Manchester City. So it doesn't seem that Jadon Sancho will want to be playing the highest level possible European football. And I think when you look in the Premier League, there's maybe, I mean, you might say Aston Villa, but maybe there's not perhaps a natural fit, and maybe he's best off just working his way into that United side. Strength and depth. These teams are now playing over 60 games a season. I think we need to get away from 2-3 players enough. These teams need strength and depth, and he'll get opportunities this season, I think.
I guess wage and transfer fee would be the barriers for Premier League clubs, but then we know that the Premier League's the league that carries the most amount of money. So if it's a barrier for Premier League clubs, probably going to be a barrier for clubs outside of the Premier League as well. I think in an ideal world, he probably would have moved to Dortmund, but Dortmund, although they facilitated the loan deal in the second half of last season, the way they operate as a club fundamentally, they're not going to pay the kind of transfer fee that Sancho is going to command, and they're not going to be able to afford the wages. So again, it kind of leaves a player stuck, because I think the ideal place for him to play his football now would be Dortmund, because we saw what he did in the Champions League last season.
OK, in terms of midfield, Man United have been looking for a midfielder for much of this window, and Manuel Ugarte remains a live option. Talks continue with Paris Saint-Germain over his signing. As it stands, Scott McTominay will remain at Old Trafford, and as a result, Manchester United may have to be creative when it comes to potential incomings. I mean, we've spoken about midfielders, central midfielders in Man United for the last couple of weeks, and the fact that we've come up with so many different names, I mean, now it seems like Ugarte is in pole position. He's the one they've zeroed in on. But the fact that we've mentioned so many names, does that suggest that there isn't an obvious option to improve the midfield?
Yeah, I think it depends what angle you look at this, because actually you could look at maybe half cup full in terms of actually Manchester United under Ineos. I think when you've looked at who they've signed this year, they really have had alternative options for each signing they've made, which actually perhaps compared to previous windows, they've had one target and pursued that one target all window. So I think actually having different options for midfield could be positive. I think Ugarte would make a lot of sense. He's a bit younger. They need a number 6, I think, to really give Mainu a bit of a break, but also rotate in and out with Casemiro as well. So I think he would be a natural fit. He's tenacious, he can play with the ball, and he's happy to put a tackle in as well. So perhaps it just alleviates the pressure off Casemiro a little bit, and also doesn't put as much pressure on Mainu as well at just 19 years old.
Right, we expect a few more incomings and outgoings, especially at Chelsea over the next few days. Let's get to Arsenal, though. They want over £30 million for Eddie Nketiah as talks continue with Nottingham Forest for the striker. First of all, from the player's point of view, do you think this is a good move for him? Is it the right time for him now to go somewhere else, seek pastures new, get some more minutes under his belt?
Yeah, it feels like that, doesn't it? I think, for Arsenal, for the player as well, he's not really been able to get consistent game time for Eddie Nketiah. And as you mentioned, I think at this point in his career, he needs to be really starting every week. I think the question is that Nottingham Forest when they have 2 strikers already in Chris Wood and Taiwo Winnie?
I mean, he's obviously, they've had injury problems, those 2 players. I think Nketiah will probably back himself to get in the team above those players. He'll have a big belief in what he can do. And I think Nketiah, what's been missing from his career so far is that consistent game time. You can't be consistent when you're playing 20 minutes here, 60 minutes there, not coming off the bench for a few games. He isn't going to get the minutes that he needs at Arsenal, so he needs to go somewhere. Forest is a good environment. You've been there plenty of times. I've been there a few times as well. Forest is a good club. I think he can go there and kind of kickstart his career a little bit. I think that's what he needs. He's almost got lost in Arsenal. I think when he signed his contract, Arsenal weren't the beast that they are now, and over the years they've almost kind of gone beyond Nketiah's current level. I'm not saying he could never get to that level, but at the moment I don't think he's quite there to be a striker for a team that's challenging for the title. And I think in some ways, if Nketiah can take a backward step at Forest, it may enable him to go forwards later on in his career.
Just a question, but if he comes into Forest with Wood and Awoniyi there, if they both stay, is he number 1? Does he go in as number 1?
I think it's a different option for Nuno Espirito Santo, and probably just allows him to be a bit more flexible week to week. I think you look at Chris Wood, he's very underrated, I think, last season. 14 goals in the Premier League, another double-digit season for him. You mentioned Taiwo Winnie, he struggled with a groin injury last season, so I think letting him work back into the season on his fitness, I don't think is a bad thing. I think with Eddie Nketiah, you have a different profile of a striker, someone who can run in behind. Also maybe link a bit differently with likes of Morgan Gibbs-White, Callum Hudson-Odoi, who he'll know very well from the England underage groups as well. Yeah. Anthony Elanga as well off the other wing. So I think, that actually as a front 4, there's a lot of speed there, there's a lot of creativity, and also it's just a bit of a different attack compared to if you would have had Taiwo Winnie or Chris Wood there. So I think that's something Nuno Espirito Santo has been looking for. I think Nottingham Forest are also potentially looking at the Feyenoord striker, Santiago Jimenez as well. So it definitely looks like they're looking for that extra number 9. We'll just see in the last week of the window again, what are they going to do about it?
OK, well, that could be one out of Arsenal. One coming in could be Mikel Merino, because Arsenal remain in talks with Real Sociedad over signing the midfielder. It's thought the clubs are finalising the payment structure and the makeup of the performance-related add-ons. Dan, I keep hearing Arsenal have had a good window in comparison to their 2 main competitors, Man City and Liverpool, who've been very dormant in this window. But they've only made one big signing, right? Ricardo Calafiori, defender in an area where they're very strong already. Do you think Arsenal need to make one more big or decent signing for it to really be considered a successful window?
I think it's tough to... we've just sat here and absolutely lambasted Chelsea. And then I think it's very difficult to then come and question what Arsenal are doing when we've seen how they've grown over the last 2 or 3 years, how they've improved upon year. They've got better and better to become... I think they are... I know they've not won anything, but I think Arsenal are an elite team now. I think Calafiori obviously came off the back of a brilliant international tournament. He gives them the natural left-footed option at left-back. So you could argue that, yes, they were well started at full-back, but he's something different, perhaps something that they need if they want to build up as a back 3. He can tuck in. He's a very versatile left-back that can do different things. I think they still need that midfield player, and that's what Merino is, someone who could come in. Partey might not be able to play every week. I think Arsenal were at their best last season when they had Partey, Rice and Ødegaard. They obviously started the season very well. They've got Jorginho there as well, but I think they just need that other option so that they can be a bit more flexible game to game, have different teams for different competitions like Champions League, Premier League. I think he'd make Arsenal stronger. I think he could play multiple roles in that midfield. If they get him in, I don't see that only signing 2 players has been a problem for Arsenal, because I think they're building in the right way. And I do think the proof's in the pudding, and I think the club has now, over the last few years, earned enough trust for the fans to think, yeah, these guys know what they're doing.
Dare I ask the question, Carve? Any more incomings at Chelsea?
Yeah, I think there will be. I think
Okay.
once Chelsea complete a deal for João Felix, they will focus on trying to sign a new striker, a new number 9. I think they accept that that is what Enzo Maresca needs, and that was obvious watching the game against Manchester City on Sunday. Chelsea needs somebody like Erling Haaland. Okay, you're not going to get somebody as good as him, but they need somebody in that mould. Kind of player they've had in the past.
Didier Drogba.
Diego Costa. You know, Chelsea used
I love Didier Drogba. Just putting it out there. I loved him. He's a great player.
They need somebody with a bit of personality, a character, with a bit of physicality.
Fear.
Yeah, you know, somebody who scores a lot of goals, somebody the fans can connect with. Now, somebody who ticks a lot of those boxes is the African Player of the Year, Victor Osimhen. We know he's been frozen out at Napoli. We know he wants to leave. We know Napoli are open to selling him. We also know that Chelsea are interested in signing him. But the latest information we have today is that Chelsea will not be signing him on a permanent deal as things stand. So Chelsea potentially only interested in a loan deal, but we already know that the player and his representatives are not interested in him going out on loan. They're saying if he's to leave Napoli, it has to be on a permanent deal. But I don't think Chelsea want to do a permanent deal at the moment because of the size of the transfer fee and also his wages. And the same goes for PSG as well. Every time people talk about Victor Osimhen, they go, yeah, he's going to leave Napoli, he's going to go to Chelsea or PSG. Well, PSG held talks about signing him earlier this summer, but they've moved on. They've signed other players. They've spent about 150 million euros, plays in other positions. And I think they looked at Osimhen. I'm not sure Luis Enrique looked at him and said he's my top target as a forward. And also the overall size of the package, again, was too much for them. And Napoli are pretty difficult, maybe, to negotiate with.
Okay.
And that is not a criticism, because their president, Mr. De Laurentiis...
They're tough, are they?
They're tough. He always defends Napoli. He does what's in Napoli's interest. So I think for those reasons that I've just gone through, PSG and Chelsea would like him, but not for the numbers being quoted. I think Chelsea definitely would like to take him on loan, but we have to wait until we get closer to the deadline to see what Chelsea and Napoli can negotiate, if in fact they do negotiate something. And also we know that Romelu Lukaku is pretty close to moving in the opposite direction to Napoli as well.
Manchester United ready to offload 5 more players before transfer deadline. As the transfer window edges towards its August 30th close, Manchester United is poised for a flurry of exits, with more players likely to leave than arrive. The club is prepared to part ways with up to 5 additional players before the transfer deadline next Friday. Jadon Sancho, who has recently returned to the squad after a 10-month hiatus, is one of the key players the club is open to letting go, either on loan or through a permanent deal. Despite his reintegration, Sancho started on the bench against Manchester City in the Community Shield and was omitted entirely from the squad in the match against Fulham. Although he was sidelined last week with an ear infection, United manager Erik Ten Hag confirmed that Sancho was fit enough to be considered for selection. With only 2 years remaining on his contract, Sancho's future at Old Trafford remains uncertain. Scott McTominay is also available for transfer as United intensifies its pursuit of Manuel Ugarte from Paris Saint-Germain. Napoli has shown interest in McTominay, but Fulham, now close to signing Sander Berge from Burnley for £25 million, is unlikely to make another bid for the midfielder. Fulham's last offer for McTominay, who scored 10 crucial goals last season, was £23 million, but United is holding out for at least £30 million. Ten Hag would be content to keep McTominay if no suitable offer materialises. With Ten Hag aiming to have at least 2 players for every position, several squad members have been deemed surplus to requirements. United currently boasts a 31-man squad, including 28 outfield players and promising youngsters like Toby Collier, Ethan Wheatley, and Harry Amas. Championship leaders Burnley have shown interest in Hannibal Mejbri, who impressed during United's win at Turf Moor last season. Mejbri, 21, spent the 2022-23 season on loan at Birmingham City. Facundo Pellistri is expected to complete a permanent move to Panathinaikos. The 22-year-old was left out of United's opening day victory over Fulham, partly because negotiations for his transfer had progressed. Meanwhile, Victor Lindelof is likely to stay at United despite missing almost 3 weeks of training following his substitution at halftime in a friendly loss to Liverpool in South Carolina. Although United cited precaution as the reason for Lindelof's withdrawal, the defender was spotted using crutches last week. United has been actively seeking buyers for Lindelof, who is out of contract next year. With the recent acquisitions of defenders Lenny Yoro and Matthijs de Ligt, Lindelof's future at the club is in doubt, particularly after missing 21 games due to injury and illness last season and only playing limited minutes in pre-season. Finally, defender Will Fish is on the verge of joining Cardiff City.